Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video so far and some of the things that I like to do with drums and effects on your PreSonus StudioLive Series 3 console. If we haven't met before, my name is James and I help worship leaders, church sound techs, and tech directors eliminate the mystery and frustration around sound at church. If that's you and you want to serve with excellence every time you're on the soundboard at church, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and welcome to the club of sound ninjas. Now there are some other videos on this board in a playlist that I'll put down in the description below so you can check that out after you've watched this one. Okay, back to Nerd Town. Now that you know how to EQ and compress the drums, there's one more thing that's a whole lot of fun, and I'm going to show you how to use Reverb on this board and some of my presets, or not presets, but settings that I tend to enjoy. So the effects send is over here on the bottom left corner. I usually send my drums to effects A. When I hit this, these faders become the sends on fader, or the level that's being sent to this reverb. This is the master for the send to this reverb, and the controls for that reverb are here on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and send, let's say, our drums. These are all post fader, by the way, and our toms and our overheads to the drum reverb. I'm going to send it as if it's an entire kit. You could just send, say, the snare drum by itself, and maybe the snare top and snare bottom. Some people don't like putting reverb on their kick drum, and that's fine if that's not what you like, but I usually like to send it all together because I want the snap of the kick drum hitting the reverb myself. Often I like to have some EQ going into the reverb so that you can take out the low frequencies that might clutter stuff up. That's a lot of the reason why people don't like the kick drum being sent to the reverb. But we're just going to send it all for right now and see what we can do with our tone shaping. Right here I've got the PAE16 digital reverb, and it's got some different presets on here. You know, setting 1, 2, 3, you know, they've got names on them. Let's see, darker room, slap room. We'll try some of these and listen to them and do that. The pre-delay is interesting. I like to set that around 30 milliseconds for drums. Pre-delay will make things sound closer to you while still in a big room. So a little bit of pre-delay kind of moves the drums forward a little bit, or gives a little bit of a space between the initial drum hit and when the reverb comes. Diffusion is how smooth it is. Low frequency and dampening frequency, that's basically how much we're going to not resonate on the bottom end. And we'll play around with that and hear what it's like. One way that you can try to listen to the effects just themselves, right? So if we can find our effects, and here's our effects return, right? So you can't see the effects send and return at the same time, kind of a bummer. But we've got, when we're on effects A, we can't see the effects return. If we go back to our main mix, we can hit that again or hit main mix. Effects A on the return will come up if we're on our aux inputs page. Right, so you could have input channels over here, you could have DCAs over here, you could have your mix and effects masters over here, but the aux inputs are really what I like. On the effects masters, let me see if I can go to effects A and select this. There is some EQ available here, and you can see that I have at one point experimented with using a low shelf to get rid of some of that low end. Let me just turn that on. Well, let's listen to it with and without it. So I just went in a big long circle to try to explain to you. If you want to hear just the reverb, you could solo it, right? So you could hit solo so that you can hit that into the effects return. I guess we can have to go to aux input and solo the effects return. I don't know why solo isn't working right now. Solo is off. Why not? You can solo that. You can solo that. You can't solo that. What's up with that, PreSonus? I guess they'll have to tell me later. So to get around that, if you're not having the headphones and would want to dial in your reverb and hear exactly what's going on, one way that you can kind of hack it is going to your input channels and unassigning them from the main bus. So their faders are still going to do stuff, you know, going to the other bus. We're going to mute that for now. But then you can hear just the reverb coming back. So that's a tool you can use if you're using virtual sound check or just trying to play around with stuff. Just don't make anybody mad, right? When you're supposed to be mixing drums and all they hear is reverb, they might look at you a little funny. Okay, that might be a little bit long, right? So our reflection time is how long the reverb hangs on. That was at 0.9 out of, you know, Yeah, that's a big mess. So let's turn that down to something a little more usable. Okay, so that's pretty cool. It feels about right. We want a drum reverb to be usually a half note long, right? So we want it to be over 2 beats, right? So by the time one snare's reverb is out, the next snare hits. That's kind of the idea, or one of the ways that I'm listening for on that. If we had a different reverb unit that actually had seconds and milliseconds, thanks PreSonus, then we could be able to dial that in with some math based on the tempo or the average tempo of our songs, but we just got to do it by feel because they just gave us a number between 0 and 1. So we're having to listen to it that way. The low pass filter makes the reverb feel farther away. Let's play with that and see how it gets really bright when we turn it up, basically using no low pass filter, and then how things feel darker and farther away when we turn it down. And again, we're listening to this by itself. We would hear the initial attack of the drums if the drums were in. Let me just pop them back in real quick. So the darker it is, the less apparent it is. So you can play around with it and see what feels good to you. Now the low frequency dampening is going to take out some of the resonance on the low end, and you get to choose the frequency and how much you're turning it down in that part of the frequency spectrum. So let me play around with this, and while still sending the kick drum to it, we can hear how maybe it cleans up the low end a little bit. Okay, so that helps it clean up quite a bit. Another way to go about that is, again, to add some EQ on the way into the drum reverb. We would do that by going to our Mix and Effects Masters, scrolling all the way over to Effects A, then hitting the input page, which is really an output, but it's our main controls for that. We go to our EQ and turn it on. So let's listen to that with and without the EQ. So that's pretty cool. I like it cleaner. I like to dump a bunch of low end going to my reverb. So I like this. I don't know, the dampening controls, they're fine too. But you can choose one or the other to try to get stuff cleaner and get the snap of the kick drum with some reverb on it without having the entire kick drum, rumbling through the reverb. Some other effects that you might try. Again, we're gonna keep this one on here. Let's see if we go to a drums AMS1. This could be fun. Okay, it sounds cool. It's not my favorite, but again, we're going for texture sometimes. So sometimes we'll even turn down the time so that it's just more like we're in a room with the drums, more than trying to add the stadium kind of like, kind of feeling. So that's kind of my thought process with that. The other thing that I really like on drums on this board is the vintage plate reverb. Just a couple controls. You know, the low pass filter, again, is nice. The dampening is nice as well. You can choose different types. You can get the screen to work for you. And it says it's for guitar and vocals, but we're just gonna go for it. Pre-delay, we're gonna dial back a little bit more. If you get really, really dialed in on a particular song, you can actually dial in the pre-delay to be an 8th note or 16th note gap between when the hit is and when the reverb jumps in. You can do the math for that if you want. I don't usually do that in a live set, but if you've got something very particular and want to get creative, that is a possibility. Let's just listen to this one and see what it sounds like. Now, one thing about effects is I like them to be more conspicuous in their absence than in their presence. Basically what that means is I want it to be more noticeable when it gets turned off, like, oh, something's missing, rather than when it gets turned on. When it gets turned on, it's just like, oh, that sounds like it should be there, right? So that's where I'm trying to get the level here. Usually that's right around -12, and you can set that on your effects return, or if you want, you can go to your effects send and set that at -12. Then you can move your effects return up and have a little bit more fine tuning over what the level is there. You get a little bit more granularity on your fader travel because it's logarithmic. I apologize for big words. I'm a nerd at heart and I can't help it. So that feels great. That's another option you can try out as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how I approach mixing drums with high pass filter, with the polarity switch, with getting my balance built, EQ, compression and effects, all the stuff. I know it's been a long one, but hey, that's what we do. We try to teach you the ways of thinking about how to mix at church so that you can get great results and have a lot of fun while you're doing it. Because when you get great drum sounds and your vocals sound clear, things feel really good. And you can have guitars that don't sound that great. You can have pianos that don't sound that great. But if your vocals are clear and your drums sound big, feels like you have a big mix and you can have basically a party. So I hope this has been enjoyable for you. If you like this and want to try practicing on your own, you can sign up for my free virtual sound check challenge. I walk you through how to set up this board in particular, along with other boards, with the different ways that you can record multi-tracks and play them back through your board so that you can practice. You can put the time in, put the reps in without having to have the band there. And it's the single biggest thing that's going to help you improve as a church sound tech. You can sign up through the link in the description below. It's totally free, and I think you're going to enjoy it if you check it out. My name is James Attaway. This is Attaway Audio, and I'd like to remind you that you should always avoid the sound tech solo. It's all about the low end, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum, even though we want to feel the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio. Hit that subscribe button, mash that like, and leave a comment down below letting me know that you made it to the end of this video.